Docker for development? Well, there are many benefits to using Docker for development. One of the benefits is that you have a consistent development and production environment with Docker. You can use the same image for both development and production. This means you're running exactly the same code with the same base dependencies in both environments. As a result, it eliminates those frustrating issues where something works locally but fails on the production server or vice versa, simply because the environments are different. By using Docker, you ensure a consistent environment on both your local development machine and the server where you deploy the application. Another benefit is easier collaboration. Often you'll be working on projects with other developers, and I can think of so many times where I've been sharing a project with someone and everything works perfectly fine on my machine. Everything runs normally. However, when we try to run the project on the other developer's machine, they run into a whole world of issues. This often happens because the dependencies on my machine are different from the dependencies on theirs. Dependencies are basically any software or package that a project relies on. And if they're not consistent across machines, it can lead to a lot of problems. For example, they might have a different version of Python, or they might have a different version of the database we're using, or a different version of some SDK tool that we are using on the software. And this means that you have a whole load of issues to sort out because you basically need to make sure all the dependencies are exactly the same on both machines. However, when you use Docker, this eliminates all of those problems because all your dependencies are inside the Docker image, which is defined in your project. So when the other developer runs your project that is set up to use Docker, in almost all cases, it just works. They just run the Docker image and it just works fine. Another benefit is that using Docker allows you to capture all of the dependencies in the source code of your project. You don't need to install things manually on your machine and configure them to work with your project. It can all be done in the code. You can define every single dependency that your project needs inside the source code. This again helps with easier collaboration. For example, you can define all of your Python requirements within your project, and you can also include all of the operating system level dependencies in your Docker file. I'll be showing you how to do this as we move through the course. Another benefit is easier cleanup. So if you're working as a professional developer, you will often be working on various different projects, and you might be just working on a project for a set period of time. So let's say you need to spend a couple of weeks working on a particular project. When you use Docker, when you're finished using the project, you can simply just delete the project files and delete all of the Docker images, and then your system is completely cleared of the dependencies that were needed for that project. You don't need to go through and manually remove any SDK or any databases that might be new in your system. It was all contained inside the Docker configuration for that project. So, how we are going to use Docker when we are developing our Django project? First, we'll define a Docker file. All the Docker files going to contain all of the operating system level dependencies that our project needs. Then will create a Docker Compose configuration. This will tell Docker how to run the images that are created from the Docker file configuration. We are going to run all the commands that we need for this project through Docker Compose. So that's an overview of what we are going to be doing for our project setup.